And welcome to tonight's edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your co-host Kahari Mosley here with my illustrious co-host Miracle Jones. How you doing, Miracle?
I am doing well, Kahari. How are you doing? I know you had a very event-filled weekend.
Yeah. Very eventful weekend. Spent a little bit of time in New York at Pennsylvania Society, the annual confab of political and business leaders and movers and shakers that happens in New York City every December since 1898. Started by Andrew Carnegie. And that is always a place to go to find out the latest on what's happening in Pennsylvania politics. Got an opportunity to hang out with the illustrious Joanna McClinton, soon to be a Speaker of the House. We think so. I think it's just, some things we got to, work out, with, the 32nd House District, the 34th House District, as well as the seat that Lieutenant Governor elect Austin Davis will be filling in January. But I think at some point in 2023, we will have the first African American woman Speaker of the House in the history of the state, the first African American speaker since the legendary K. Leroy Irvis. So that's super exciting. A lot, going on in the political world. It looks like this weekend. Speaking of the 32nd House District in Penn Hills and Plum Borough, it looks like the Democratic nomination will take place. It looks like Aaron Vecchio, longtime school board member, and Mayor Calabrese are both going to be running for the nomination. I don't know if other folks are going to jump in, but I think they have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to let the Allegheny County Democratic Party know that they will be running for that seat, at least on the Democratic side, because it is a special election. And this endorsement is, a de facto nomination. And then there'll be an election on February 7th to decide who will fill Tony DeLuca's seat, which essentially would be for an entire term, being that he unfortunately passed away shortly before the general election. But Lieutenant Governor nominee on the GOP side, Carrie Del Rosso, is thought to be the GOP's pick. They said that she's away with family currently, kind of getting some downtime after a long, grueling election season. And she will be deciding at some point mid-month if she will be the standard bearer for the Republican Party. But it looks like she's going to be getting a lot of support, a lot of encouragement from Republican leaders in Allegheny County to run for that seat. It's some of the interesting things happening. Local politics also, Miracle, we saw at least 4 candidates announce their interest in running for the 34th House seat, which will be vacated by soon-to-be Congresswoman Summer Lee. We have Bhavani Patel, we have Ashley Comans, Letitia Washington, and Abigail Salisbury all announcing their intention also to seek the Democratic nomination in the 34th House District, which will be, a special election that will essentially be an entire House term as well. So not as much information about the seat in McKeesport that Lieutenant Governor-elect Austin Davis has held for the last several cycles, but definitely a lot of action, so to speak, happening in the 34th House District and the 32nd House District.
Yeah, and I know we're very excited about election 2023, but here in Georgia, election 22 is still ongoing. Tomorrow, the Georgia Senate runoff election will take place. Again, that is the runoff, because in Georgia, it is not winner take all. You have to have at least 50% of the vote to be declared a winner. So here in Georgia, there's going to be election tomorrow. And again, One Power has been involved in the Georgia Senate runoff race, stopping and pushing for Warnock. So we know a lot of people are taking a breath, thinking that the election is on pause. But no, we still have the election still ongoing, and we want to remember that politics is local. This week, county council is going to be looking at the budget. They have another budget session plans for this week to think about what is going to happen with the budget. We know we're going to have a conversation today about housing, but the county is one of the entities that is in charge with support for housing, and has and holds the money when it comes to housing support. So there's going to be a very, very big decision happening this week when it comes to the budget at county council, which we want to again remind people to stay tuned for, and to talk to our local elected officials on county council to push and advocate for more resources. In addition, to that, there is still some cases going on at the Supreme Court on the national level when it comes to things like LGBT protections, when it's coming to expansive adoption rights, and also indigenous sovereignty. So there's a lot of things to be mindful of. And even here in Pennsylvania, our Supreme Court is still down a member. So that is going to be an election that's going to be held next year as well. So we will have not only our municipal elections in 2023, but we'll have an unexpected judicial election due to the untimely passing of the Pennsylvania chief. So again, there's a lot of things on this electoral calendar that we've got to stay mindful of. And like Akari was saying, there is going to be some changes in the Pennsylvania legislature. Those are still up in the air, but that the new Pennsylvania legislature will be tasked with addressing a lot of issues, from public safety to housing security. And so it's going to be very important that people stay engaged. And over the weekend, we saw a lot of elected officials being out in the community, putting out a plan like for safety and support. So it's going to be very integral in the weeks and months coming forward that the people who are making these decisions are actually hearing from the community and engaging the community. Back to you, Kahari.
Yeah, thank you. And also, in other news, Jill Beck, who ran for the statewide court in 2021, has announced her candidacy again for Superior Court. So as Miracle said, not just mayor of Philly, not just county executive in Allegheny County or district attorney. There's also some statewide races, one to fill the Supreme Court seat, but there'll also be a race to fill a Superior Court seat in Pennsylvania. So there'll be a lot of action, not only in the primary around local elections, but in the general election around these statewide judicial seats, which we realized not only at the statewide level, but also at the federal level are so important.
And so one of the things that we know that is so important when it comes to elections is housing. And so this entire power hour, we're going to be talking about housing and about what that means, what options are available. As a reminder, when it comes to housing, Pittsburgh is a second city class, which that basically means that some decisions are not held within the city, they're held within the county, and if not in the county, they're held within the legislature. And so while the city does have some navigation and some say in housing support, they are not the deciding factor. And so we're going to be having a conversation about what resources are available right now, what resources are coming in the future, and how can people be supported in the city as well as in the counties. So people are wondering how it's broken up. First, we're going to talk with Lisa Frank about the housing options for a particularly vulnerable community, which is the unhoused population, addressing some issues and concerns that have been raised within the community. And then we're going to be talking with Action Housing about some resources that are available, not only for renters, but people who have mortgages, what can be done to keep people housed, and also what's coming in the future. And that's how we're going to do it. As a reminder, you're able to ask questions directly to our guests in the comment section. We do ask people engage with respect when they are talking. As a reminder, we just try to have conversations here at the Power Hour. And with that being said, we want to welcome our first guest, Lisa Frank, who works with the city of Pittsburgh, does a lot of tasks, but one of the things she has been involved in as part of her official duties is helping individuals relocate, particularly people who have been unhoused, relocate to shelters throughout the city, and has been one of the people heading up this task force. So with that, we want to welcome to the Power Hour, Lisa Frank.
Thank you, Miracle. Hey, Kahari.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay.
And so to get right into it, there's been a lot of conversation about the unhoused population for a variety of reasons. But just to start out, can you just tell us what is the city's plan to make sure, as winter is coming, that people who are unhoused have access to shelter?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'm just going to take one step back just for a second, because I know that's the question that people want to hear about. But I do just sort of want to start with, I guess what everybody knows is that, you know, the best plan for unhoused people is housing. And so even as we're dealing with the folks who, you know, in the current situation, in this current winter are, are unhoused and need solutions, it's really, really important that all of us, I know Kyle's going to talk about this, but the administration too, in the background or even in the foreground, are really, really working to make sure that affordable, decent housing with supports, if that is necessary, is available. Because at the end of the day, that's really the only plan for our unhoused residents that is actually going to work. And so I'm actually looking forward to speaking with Kyle a little bit myself, and sharing some of the things that we're doing and so on. But what people want to hear from me about, I think, is the folks who are currently unhoused, and particularly unsheltered unhoused folks, I think is what the conversation has really been about. And so, as you mentioned, Miracle, I mean, the plan there is to try to help as many people as we possibly can with all of the resources that we have to find accommodation that is safe, that is supported, that lets people, move from a condition that I think is a very, very hard condition for people, into a space and into maybe a life that they will find comfortable and rewarding. And we want to make that possible. The philosophy that housing people have is housing first, sort of whatever your troubles may be, they're all easier to handle when you've got a spot that you feel secure in and can be secure in. So that's really what we're trying to do with our unsheltered, unhoused people this winter, this fall, this winter. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Lisa. And from your point of view of just being with the administration for almost a year now, and kind of being thrust into this situation, and I also I want to take a step back as well, that this issue is very near and dear to me. Some people who know me very well know that I had the unfortunate experience of coming home my sophomore year from college, and my mother being homeless.
Oh, I did not know that.
Worked through Bethlehem Haven, and and I'm spending
Right.
the better part of the summer, getting my mother off the streets after losing a job and being, put out on the streets. And I think there's a lot of folks who, are understandably, frustrated with the situation. They see, people like the homeless in the streets. They want to point fingers at political leaders or point, fingers at government. But, how can you, from your bird's eye view, this situation really explain to people, like how we get in this situation, particularly for individual lives that kind of just make a turn that just happens. And I think people want to find like a scapegoat to point at. They don't understand. I mean, in my mother's case, it only took her a month to lose her job, lose her apartment, and she was living in West Park on the north side between the end of my semester and finals. And this was 20 years ago. And I'm not like trying to, put, all my mom's business out there, make she rest in peace. But I just share that personal story because I think people, really don't understand how quickly someone's life can turn upside down, which then forces them or puts them in a situation where they're unhoused.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things that are happening that are resulting in this. We had a little bit of protection when there was ERAP. There were rental supports and there were moratoriums on evictions. In the I don't know what the height of the COVID period, and all of that is sort of gone. So any difficulties that people were having are, they're really hitting now, right? So, some people are, it sounds like this might have been your mom's story, homelessness is really an economic, thing like job loss, no rent, hard ass landlord. And there you are evicted. For some people, we have a lot of folks who are, living unhoused because of domestic violence, and that seems like a better solution than staying where they were. We've got people who there's a significant overlap between people who are unhoused and people who are really kind of struggling with addiction, and that made things at home a certain kind of way. And fentanyl is tough. It's really tough. So there's all kinds of things that conspire to make this happen, and ranging from sort of capital. Maybe it all ranges from capitalism, but the finger pointing, I think, that is most upsetting is the finger pointing at unhoused people. I did a meeting with somebody. We were trying to get some money to do a couple of things, and you got whatever, people who have money, and and the rap was sort of like, I don't know why I should help here, because I'm a taxpayer, and here are people who don't have jobs, who are making a mess in parts of the city that I enjoy, and they're ruining my enjoyment, and really we should sort of scoop everybody up and tell them what, I don't know, just move them, like they did in colonial times, just warn people out. And that's really upsetting, because, and it's not, it's not just because it's heartless. It is heartless, and it's not because it's it's cruel, but also because it won't work. It's like people sometimes see kind of compassion or services or trying to help lift people up as like, well, you're doing that because you're you don't have the stomach for what would really work. But those things don't really work. They don't really work. They just move the problem to another place, and worse than that, you lose track of people in the process, and people generally deteriorate in the process. So that's when I get really upset, is when people are pointing the finger at yes, they yell at us, but that's okay. That we're paid to get yelled at,
So we talked about heartless and cruel. I want to transition a little bit, because there has been a lot of fear and concern about the threats of what we call them raids, clearing campsites, if you will. So can you just talk ask like a series of questions, but can you just talk about what is the process the city is undergoing as they're engaging unhoused populations? Does the city do encampment raids, clearing out? Are there plans for clearing out encampments? And what is the process the city is taking as they're engaging this population? I know it's a lot of questions, but I feel like it will, as you give the answer, they'll all come together.
Yep. So I guess I might start by talking about like where this first came up, and there was a lot of media and there was a lot of social media and stuff was like Fort Duquesne, the bypass, which I think was for people. Okay, this is the city, and this is the city engaging in a raid. So what happened there from where let me take a step back. So the best resource that we have in the city for doing work with unhoused people is our Roots team, and I think people know that's a partnership that we have with AHN. So these are outreach workers, and their whole job is to talk to unhoused people all day, every day. And they really know folks pretty well. They're not in Fort Duquesne anymore, but they're on the river trails. They're in the camps that people don't see. We have visible, unsheltered, unhoused people, and we have people who are in historic camps that they're not getting on anybody's nerves, but still need resources, need somebody to be checking in, need somebody to see if anybody needs medical attention or anything like that. So that's really who the city does our work through, and how people have conversations with unhoused people. I'll just say parenthetically, people for a while had phones. There was a program where unhoused people had phones, and then we learned that the provider who was doing that didn't want to do it anymore. So the city is also trying to come up to speed there, so that we can get back into a place where people have phones, because that seems like a pretty basic bit of equipment for human beings in the 21st century. Anyway, so what happened there is that there was a group of unhoused people who'd been living there for a while, who maybe 6 or 7 of them, who then became kind of meshed or entrapped really with a open air drug market that was also happening often in tents. And there have been some shootings and some stabbings, and we had a couple of workers had that happen to them. And in the course of those conversations, what the people who were there who were unhoused, the other folks went home at night, left the tents but went home at night. But there were some people who were truly living there, and they really just didn't want to be there anymore. And we kept waiting for Second Avenue Commons to open, or it was before shelter. November 15th is the traditional shelter day in the city of Pittsburgh, and this was before that. And we thought, oh well, could everybody hang on, and maybe we could make it to shelter day. And we decided that we couldn't. So we rented some hotel rooms, and we helped people sort through their belongings and move them to hotels until we could move them, into shelter or into more kind of permanent housing. So when I saw like the conversation happening around that, like the city is raiding people and so on, it really just wasn't the case. The mayor is absolutely committed that no one is going to get arrested for being unhoused. Nobody who doesn't want to come indoors will be forced to come indoors. We want people, where people are is not the greatest place in our estimation, but people have choices, and we'll work with them. But in that case, there was not a single person who did not want to be moved. There was a lot of conversation about how people had been forced to do something, but it wasn't the case. And it is in general our experience that, and our outreach workers, they can go name by name. They've been talking to people for a year, can tell you what is the housing hope for people, and with very, very few exceptions, the housing hope that people have is not, I would like to stay right here for the winter. It's just not. So that's, I guess I would say that it doesn't really resonate with me when people say the city is conducting raids. It just doesn't really resonate.
So just for clarification, you can say yes or no. Does the city conduct raids on homeless encampments? Does the city have future plans to raid or forcibly remove or move any homeless encampments?
Yeah, we absolutely. We have a lot of folks who are still outdoors.
The question was forcibly raid. Does the city have plans to forcibly raid in the future?
No.
Okay. The third thing, we know that there was signage put up about, and I think this rolls into the question that the answer you're about to give. We know that there was signage put up saying that removal was coming. Can you just talk about why that signage went up, what that signage means, and why people will see that signage in the future? I think that's what you're about to go, but I just wanted
I'm hoping people won't see that, but I am about to go there. Okay, so
yeah, I just wanted to clarify it.
Thank you.
So it helped.
In 2003, and I wasn't doing this work or paying that much attention in 2003, so some of what I know is people passing it down and hearsay and whatnot. It'd be actually really interesting to go through the newspaper accounts, and I just didn't really have time to do that. But there were some unhoused people who were moved. I think, I don't know if it was forcibly or not forcibly, but what happened in the course of that was that their property was destroyed. So, while in the United States, you do not have a right to housing. Actually, in a couple of places you do. I think New York and maybe Massachusetts. Property is pretty, we got a lot of respect for property. And so there was a lawsuit that the city lost that said, you can't take people's property from them and you can't destroy it. And if people are going to move, or you're going to move people, or you have any moving going on, you have to put up a sign that lets people know that that's happening, that their property is, their own, and you can't destroy it. So it was really as a result of that lawsuit. Personally, I actually, our law department is looking into it. Like, could we actually say what's kind of like real? Could we have a sign that says, hey, have you seen an outreach worker today? Maybe you haven't seen an outreach worker today, but there are some options for you. And if you would like to, talk about it, here's a phone number. Because this place is not what we hope for you, and probably not what you're hoping for yourself. Like, okay, that's a lot to put on a sign, but within the constraints of the consent decree, I'd really like something that conveyed our intentions for people better than that. It's not the greatest sign.
So just for clarification, that sign that went up is something that you're legally required to post. So people, even though they've been volunteering, but because you're assisting in the transition to either the shelter or stable housing, because you're the city entity, you're required to put that signage up. But that signage does not indicate a raid or an arrest or a forcible seizure.
No. I mean, an arrest is just totally out of the question. I mean, that is just not ever going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And as I said, just today, we started to have a conversation with the law department. Like, let's look at this thing and see, did it expire? Because it really just, it's not helpful. I mean, it's not helpful for anybody. It's not helpful in so many ways. I mean, what happened? Look at what happened when those signs went up. I mean, people are like, what's happening? But also it was like a cue to the media. And, we're trying to be really careful about people's dignity. The media, there have been so many occasions in which the media has, just sort of like barged in and talked to people who, it's like somebody's house, right? And it's just like, well, here's a microphone and here's a whatever. So, as we've been doing this, we've been trying not to turn it into a media spectacle. Like, it's like, if this is your moving day, you're going to pull out all your stuff. You're going to sort through it. You're going to decide what of it is trash, what of it is that I want to take. It's a hard day for people in a lot of ways. We've discovered people have all kinds of feelings about it. They have feelings of relief. They have feelings of shame. They have feelings. There's a lot going on. And having all of that, have everybody kind of like crowded in on that is just, the crowding happens with the media. The crowding happens with neighbors. The crowding had just like, so we'd really kind of just like to work along and have conversations and help people get to safe places. And sometimes, honestly, people who do not want to come indoors, because they can't tolerate it. We have folks who have been traumatized in all kinds of ways, who are living outside, and some of that trauma maybe happened in a shelter, and maybe that's just not really in the books. But there are still safer and less safe spots outdoors, depending on what community folks are in, depending on, I'm sure people read some of the news about what happened to a homeless person downtown just over the weekend. We've had residents who've done great things. We have mixing up with drug markets. So, everybody deserves a conversation about where they should be. And we are, definitely focusing on the spots where we feel like there's the most, reason to be worried. We don't need the, we don't need the media. That's a long answer about a sign, but
not
was it an answer? I did that.
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, thanks so much. And I really appreciate, you bringing up, the word dignity, because I think that's something that gets lost, particularly for people that may have not, had have a family member or a friend or know someone, who has struggled, with this unfortunate situation. Beyond like some of the, the policies, how, are you, approaching, that thing of dignity, as well as, I think, helping to, get across to our fellow residents and our fellow citizens that these are human beings. I think so much of that, humanity gets lost in the frustration when people drive past and they may see a tent, or they'll see something that they feel is some sort of a nuisance. Is there anything that the city is doing, and maybe other agencies that you're partnering with to help to get across, to our fellow citizens that, how we get them to really see the humanity in this situation and get beyond maybe knee-jerk reactions of, frustration, or this is some sort of a nuisance, like that you spoke of before, like, well, I'm a taxpayer. Is there anything that we can do, to help drive the message home that these are people, and we really, really need to, lift up dignity, to lift up the humanity, and really find a sense of empathy and compassion, to help, solve this problem, and not, the more draconian, tactics that some people may want to do, given a certain kind of visceral knee-jerk reaction to how they may feel about, this certain challenge that we're collectively facing as a city.
Yeah, that is the real question. And it's the real question about our unhoused people. It's a real question about, violence. It's real. I don't know a way to do that except for people to do things like this. We do a lot of community meetings. We try to talk to people. We have where we felt like it was a dignified proposition. We have done meetings of unhoused folks and other people, where that felt right and people wanted to do it. Because this is a really hard time. Like, people are let me take one step back. There are many, many people who are just wonderful. We get a lot of calls every day. What can we do to help? What can we bring? And if you are out, in along the rivers or in the trails or even in the places that are a little less visible and less seen, people show up all the time with food, with coffee, with comfort items of all kinds of things. There's a lot that's happening that is really wonderful and would kind of restore your faith in humanity a little bit. And then there's all kinds of places where people have just, it's the post-pandemic, and I think some, people have sort of lost that muscle a little bit. We haven't been together in a long time, or I haven't had that experience. I've been insulated from that experience. So it is the question, and we just keep trying. Sometimes it's one by one. We get a lot of individual emails. We try to answer those emails. We get phone calls. We try to answer them. We come and try to do these kinds of engagements. We go to the community organizations. We go to the public safety meetings, and really try to help people to be more outraged at the lack of housing than they are at the unhoused.
And we have one more question. It's going to be our last question. So I do thank you. And obviously, this is something that people are very passionate about. So we'll have to have like a future follow up. I think this is one question that a lot of people are having concern. If you can put that in the highlights. This comes from Pittsburgh Legal, who says, what is the plan for moving camps away from the river if there aren't going to be any raids? What will happen if people refuse to move?
Mm-hmm. So so far, what will happen if people refuse to move is, we're just hoping that is a non-question, and mostly it has been because people are, because it's cold. I am so much more worried about having space for everybody than anything else. We housed 198 people overnight last night downtown. So that is pretty close. We've got 2 AC at the 2nd Avenue Commons, and we've got Smithfield. And we're working hard because my biggest concern is actually that on the very first shelter night, November 15th, I think, or something, and we were not totally ready, and we had to put up a sign that said, there isn't a spot, and that is not anywhere that I want to be. So, our outreach workers are working really, really hard. We will stretch budgets, and we will stretch our imaginations, and we will stretch liability and risk to make sure that everybody wants to come in. And thus far, we have not talked to people who won't, can't think of a situation that they would prefer to that. And including, we moved somebody the other day who is committed to being outdoors, but was outdoors in a place that was very exposed, where there had been threats of violence, and had a conversation with that person and said, that's great. Respect that you want to be outdoors. Here are some places that might be better. Let's go look at some places that might be better where you can, maintain what you want to be doing a little bit better than that. So that is really our hope that is going to work. And thus far it has. The mayor has said absolutely clearly, being unhoused is not a crime. Nobody's going to jail over this. If we get in a stuck place, I guess we'll just have to be inventive and see what we can do. But it's just like on Fort Duquesne, there was not a person there who did not want to find something better. But jail is out of the question.
Okay, thank you so much for that. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to bring in Kyle from Action Housing, because you said you want to stick around and have a conversation with Kyle. So we're going to bring in Kyle after this short break. Okay. We have a quick promo to run.
Okay.
So give it up for yourselves. Thank y'all for being here. And without further delay, a legend in our midst, my brother, Westside Lupe Fiasco in the building. Let's give it up for him, y'all.
So transition, we want to bring in now Kyle from Action Housing. There's a lot of conversation. We were talking particularly with resources and support for unhoused people, but what people may not know is that there are also resources and support to prevent people from losing their shelter right now. Again, because of legal definitions, it's very difficult to get access to support, because whether on the federal level, on the state level, you have to be homeless for a period of time to get resources in the future. So before that happens, we wanted to share some resources. We know it's cold, it's the holidays, and there are a lot of families who are struggling. So welcome to the Power Hour, Kyle. Can you just talk a little bit about Action Housing and the work that you do and some of the resources that your organization offers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate you spotlighting this really important issue. Action has the privilege of being one of the largest, we are the largest affordable housing nonprofit in the greater Pittsburgh region and in Western PA. We play a role in a lot of different things that relate to housing. In addition to, the primary reason that I was asked to be here today, which is our role in housing stabilization programs, which really kind of the precursor to, houselessness is the fact that you are, potentially facing eviction, you're potentially facing removal from the place that you're currently sheltered in. And housing stabilization programs strive to intervene and assist you with financial resources and other resources to prevent that from happening. Other things that Action Housing is involved in, just to kind of give little plugs, we are actually involved in a lot of the homeless services that were just being highlighted. I do actually want to just say, in addition to Smithfield and Second Avenue Commons, there is a third low barrier shelter in Allegheny County. It's down in the Mon Valley in downtown McKeesport. At the McKeesport Downtown Housing, the former YMCA facility, because homelessness, unfortunately, these issues are not strictly isolated to the city of Pittsburgh. They extend throughout the region, and those who are without shelter do need shelters throughout the region. Other things we do weatherization, we do mortgage assistance, we do quite a few things. But for purposes of this meeting, we are heavily involved in the housing stabilization space. We were the primary administrator of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which was an unprecedented influx of federal dollars for rental assistance and housing stabilization. Over the last 2 years, Action Housing has administered about $150 million in rental assistance. To give a comparison, so that's $150 million over the last 2 years. Prior to the last 2 years, in an annual year, the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County gave out about $2 to $2.5 million in rental assistance. So we really have seen an unprecedented amount of money flow through due to the pandemic. But as a result of that, we also have seen an unprecedented infrastructure built out at what it looks like to rapidly get assistance out the door and truly stabilize people in real time as best as possible. There is a little bit of a weird moment right now between ERAP and kind of the next step, but there are still some resources that I can get into. But yeah, that's generally what Action Housing is and what we do.
Thank you. And before I go to Kahari, can you just talk a little bit of those resources? I know I was having a conversation with your coworkers, and that's how I found out that there is resource assistance for people who are behind on their mortgages. So can you just talk a little bit about the resources that are available to renters and people who are mortgagees?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I would say, a lot of people think that because ERAP's over, that means that there is not access for rental assistance. That is not true. The entry point for most rental assistance right now is the Allegheny link. So if you contact the Allegheny link, 1-866-730-2368, they will be able to connect you. It's a lot of acronyms. There's FEP, there's HSP, there's ESG, there's EPP. There's these different rental assistance programs that have different capacities to help based upon the situation that you're facing. For those who maybe aren't comfortable calling the link, have had a bad experience before, or just want a little bit more assistance, there is the Housing Stabilization Center in downtown at 415 7th Avenue. That is a collaboration between Action Housing, Rent Help PGH, and the Hill District Consensus Group. In that space, you can go in between 9:30 and 4:30 Monday through Friday and connect with a resource navigator who will assist you in the application process. Most of the current programs that exist relate directly to eviction filings or mediation through just mediation. So there are some strings to the current funding that does require a heightened level of housing instability, unfortunately, but they are still there. And if you go to the Housing Stabilization Center, or if you go to the Rent Help PGH website and call their hotline, you can get connected to a resource navigator who can help you kind of figure out what's going to be the best fit for you. And the Allegheny link can also, of course, help you with that as well. On the mortgage side, for those who are homeowners, there is the PA HAF program. Pennsylvania HAF is a program funded through the American Rescue Plan. It provides for up to $50,000 for mortgage assistance, and as well as delinquent property taxes, insurance premiums, homeowner and condominium fees, utilities, the things that would make your housing unstable as a homeowner. And that is available through pahaf.org. If you go to that website, if you don't have access to the internet, or if you want a little bit more assistance, Action Housing has also been engaged through who Miracle was referencing before. Valletta is one of the people working on that. Action Housing has been engaged to assist people and offer some kind of handholding in getting through that process, since it can be a bit confusing. And that you can reach us by 412-281-2102 or visit our website, drop us an email, however you want to get in touch with us.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Kahari.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Kyle. And you talked a bit about this substantial, increase in federal funds that were made available, and obviously a tremendous increase in resources that have been, provided, to those in need. Can you talk just about just from a ballpark figure? how many more people have needed to be served, during this just tumultuous time that we've been in the last couple of years, as compared to past years. I know you talked a little bit about the kind of the monetary, disparity in how much funds have been spent. But can you talk just about in numbers of like families or people that have had to be served, so folks can really get a sense? Because I think in some ways, for many of us who have been more fortunate than others, this challenge, this crisis isn't necessarily touching us the same way. We don't always kind of see the depth, of the impact. But you talk about just how many more families and people have needed, these services and these supports, over the last 2 or 3 years as we've really struggled through, this historically tumultuous time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the CARES Rent Relief Program, which was the short-term program back in the fall of 2020, that program directly supported about 3,500 households. And then the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which went from March of 2021 until July of 2022, that program directly assisted about a little over 20,000 households. At the end of that program, we were forced to deny about 12,000 households. So the amount of money that was infused was unprecedented. It was a substantial amount of money and a substantial undertaking, but it was inadequate. And that's something that we know. We've said very publicly that Action Housing had the privilege of serving and helping thousands of families and failing hundreds. And that is very much the reality of what happened over the last few years. Additionally, ERAP was really a program that was set up to kick the can. It was looking to prevent an eviction crisis during the height of the pandemic, which was an important thing that needed to be done. And I do believe it achieved that by kicking that can down the road. The downside was it had this assumption that at the end of the pandemic, whatever that means, of course, everything would be fine. And suddenly everyone would be able to just be stabilized and, be fine. But we know that, income disparity, housing stability, all these things have increased drastically during the pandemic. So people who were stabilized through ERAP during the pandemic don't just suddenly have the money to pay their rent due to the change in their situation, due to increasing rent amounts in, the Allegheny County and the city of Pittsburgh. Minimum wage has not gone up, but rent has gone substantially up. So you see this massive increase in housing stability. Some folks have been unable to return to the workforce. Some folks have had a change of situation, et cetera. So it has been inadequate. And the best metric I can give you is, again, that 12,000 number that we had to deny in August. It was heartbreaking to do that. But that is, a number we're able to go for to give you a gauge of the folks who weren't able to access. I will say, currently we do know one of the questions that I was given as prep was, how many folks are housing unstable right now? There's a, point in time calculation for homelessness. There's not a point in time calculation for houselessness in terms of for housing instability. And so it's really a hard thing to gauge, but we do know that at this point we're at around pre-pandemic levels of eviction filings, and the largest evictors pre-pandemic haven't gotten back to evicting. So we are seeing pre-pandemic levels of eviction filings, and some of those key players haven't started evicting yet. So really what we see on the horizon is pretty terrifying.
So thank you so much for that, and that's again why we wanted to have this conversation, because we know as it gets colder, people's pockets are spread more thin. You got to buy coats, you got to pay heat now, heat bill goes up. And so there's a lot of people who are going to need some of these resources. And so I want to thank you so much for that, Kyle. I did want to go back to you, Lisa. So a couple of people, social media and everything, people have going comments and they're asking, with all of this stuff that's happening, I believe it may be Illum, I'm not sure if I mispronounced that. They said, will this city commit to not sweeping, clearing, or decommissioning any of the camps on without individualized housing plans that take into consideration of specific a person's recovery needs, etc. So what I think they're asking is, because there may be, as Kyle was referencing, an influx of people who may become unhoused soon, can the city, even if not right now, if you guys go run it through legal, can the city commit to not doing these sweeping, clearing, decommissionings with the cancel? I know legal has been so
You've been legal. Listen,
you can't
good, sorry.
commit to following up on that question.
Yeah, and I'm happy to follow up and talk about it more. I mean, I said this, I am so much more worried about not having housing for people than I am about, I don't know what, when we began to talk about how were we going to, I'm going to take, do we have time? I don't want to overuse time. Let me take a huge step back. The difference in unhoused persons now from, say, 5 years ago isn't exactly the number of unhoused persons. It's the way in which unhoused persons are unhoused, right? So, because shelters during the pandemic didn't feel like it was good to crowd people in and so on and so forth, it felt like it would be safer to have people outdoors in tents and so on. So the whole kind of camp thing is it's a new post-COVID kind of phenomenon. And of course you have to think about it differently and you have to talk about it differently. And from the very moment that we started to think about, well, here comes Second Avenue Commons. Before Second Avenue Commons, the county would have maybe 1 or 2 beds open a day. Second Avenue Commons represented a pretty big shift because we were going to get hundreds I guess close to hundreds, 100 plus. And that gave us a different kind of opportunity to think about how to address this, with communities of people who were living unhoused together. So I called them encampment. So the very first day, I mean, the commitment that we made to ourselves and that the mayor made and that everybody made is that, you can't ask people to move without a credible offer for them. And credible offer, it's hard because like part of your question is, without all of the adequate supports, we don't have all the adequate supports that, I would like to have everybody in exactly the place that is right for them, supported housing here with people doing real, drug treatment plans with people who really want them. And so that is the place that we want to get to more than any other place in the world. But we did commit that you cannot ask people to live their house outdoors if you don't got a credible, decent place for them to go indoors. And that has been our commitment from the beginning. It will remain our commitment. It is why I am mostly concerned about not having places for people, that are not just like, here's a cot for 4 hours in a church basement. That's not really a credible offer. So that is what we're working on. And then the other parts of the question, consideration for people's needs. Oh, from your lips to God's ears. Yes, let us please figure that out. That's my reaction to that question.
Okay, so halfway, you have, there's a halfway commitment there. So thank you so much for that. Coming back to you, Kyle, I know in prep for this conversation, you said a lot of stuff may be up in the air. I know County Council is having a budget hearing this week. Can you talk about some of the things that may be coming in the future and what are some of the resources you're hoping Allegheny County gets soon?
Yeah, so there's a request for proposals that came out. I think it was in late August for kind of the housing stabilization program through Allegheny County DHS. Proposals were due in October. The county has not yet selected the recipient of that grant award for the implementation of that program. That's a program that's intended to be, I believe, between 10 and 13 million the first year, which would be 2023, and then about 3 or so million each year after that while they figure out if there's additional funding. So that is a program that theoretically should be announced at some point soon, that it will be launched, and then it'll be implemented. So that will exist and be a bit more of a robust and collaborative program across the county to address these issues. Full disclosure, Action Housing was one of the entities that did apply for that. So I obviously am in no way involved in the selection process, so I don't know what the status is, but that would be a question for DHS. Additionally, there are other, housing stabilization goes well beyond just rental assistance, just addressing the unhoused, et cetera. There is also, the condition of the housing stock in Allegheny County. We have the whole home repairs program coming down the line, which is going to be a really key player in housing stabilization. Because, another reason that people end up unhoused is because they don't have adequate housing that they may even own. It's just not inhabitable. It's not livable. And that program is going to be unprecedented. It's actually one of our local politicians, Sarah Namrado, and a few other folks who stepped up to the plate and got that passed through the budget process. So we do anticipate a substantial amount of money here in Allegheny County for home repairs in an unprecedented manner, which is really exciting. And that should hopefully launch in, I would assume, February or March, based upon the timeline that the state has put into place. The mortgage assistance program, it exists. I would love to see it get a little bit more attention. I don't think it's gotten the same applications levels that they expected. So I'd love to see us get the word out on that a bit more, so that homeowners do know that there's relief when it comes to their, even if they don't have a mortgage, if it comes to the taxes, the insurance, the condominium fees, et cetera. Those are things that can be covered through that program. And people should definitely tap into those because, COVID was hard, and people had to make sacrifices, and tapping into the resources necessary to stabilize you moving forward is really important. Other stuff, there's a lot of conversation about other stuff coming down the pike. We'll see where it goes. One thing I can tell you is it's real important to elect good people who want to fund good programs and trust good nonprofits to implement them. So.
And coming back to you, Lisa, I know this programs are happening. Movement is happening a lot. Like, for instance, when you were relocating the individuals, there was an issue where people thought they were going to be evicted from the hotel, but that wasn't the case. Because there's so many things happening, who do people need to contact about these questions? People are really, really not only impacted by this housing crisis, but really care about this community. I think that's part of the passion, the feedback. So who do we get? I know when I reached out, I emailed 40 people, put them on account. Probably wasn't the best idea, but how do we know who to contact? Just so we get better clarity and understanding about what's going on.
Right. So I do want to give people a number and then I'm going to answer that question. For people who are, looking for unhoused people who are looking for assistance, maybe you're newly unhoused or, just the number of the person to call, our Roots team, which is fast. Kyle mentioned the link. They have access to the link. They have access to, the daily census and the different shelters and so on. So I think it's a good phone number to have in your pocket. The operations manager for the Roots team, whose name is Sarah Autori, Autor, and her number is, and you could drop it in the chat. I couldn't figure out how to do the general chat, is 412-396-9447. So that's like a help number that we'd like to see, we'd like people to have. And then, if you want to ask a question, and I appreciate that if people want to ask questions, as I said, we're trying to, I sort of defer to our outreach team. Those are the folks who know, they talk every day to people who are unhoused. They're having those conversations. Sometimes they're easy, sometimes they're hard conversations. And so when we're trying to balance things like blasting out information, which we know is going to bring media and is going to bring onlookers and is going to bring certain kinds of things, and risking misinterpretation, we generally sort of ask them, how would you weigh this? And of course, they always say, well, risk the misinterpretation because that's political and y'all should take the punches, and people who are unhoused should not. And they are right. I think people should just reach out directly. Miracle, you reached out that day. I was so grateful that you did, because I'm happy to tell people what's going on. If you want to know what the city's doing, if you want to know what the county's doing, then I guess you should call the county. But in terms of, what are the mayor's policies and what is the city doing? What are our outreach teams, our Roots teams doing? I'm happy to answer those questions for people. If people call and say, are people getting evicted from the hotel? What I'm probably going to do is call the person who arranged those hotel rooms and say, what the hell, are people getting evicted from the hotel? And I'm happy to pass that answer back. And in that case, it turned out, luckily they were not. Well, not luckily, people planned for them not to get evicted from the hotel. So, you got my email, use it.
Can I add one quick thing to that I just think is also notable? For folks who maybe, you know, are privileged to not be facing the possibility of being unhoused and who maybe don't need these resources, but you want to help in some way, every organization that does homeless services in Allegheny County is understaffed right now, and they are all actively hiring. So if you are someone who is looking for employment and wants employment in an area that does a net benefit to the unhoused population of this county and this region, Pittsburgh Mercy, Action Housing, Team PSBG, Allegheny County DHS, the AHN outreach team, all of these folks are actively hiring, and I would definitely encourage folks to look into that. That's a really good way to make money, develop your career in skill sets, et cetera, but also directly address and assist in these problems. Because I do know that that's been an ongoing issue, is that there is, you know, obviously a hiring crisis right now as well. And all of these organizations do tend to be understaffed right now.
Can I just, I know we need to close up, but can I just throw in one other thing behind that, Kyle, because it's so important. You know, like we do sometimes turn up like, oh, here's a housing resource that people would really find attractive, like, you know, whatever, a building or something like that. And to be able to open that and offer that to people, we do have to be able to staff it. So, you know, understaffing is a problem for the people who are trying to run the current services, but they're also, you know, what prevents us from sometimes from actually bringing more housing online. So that is great. Yeah, thank you for saying that, Kyle.
So thank you so much. I want to thank Lisa Frank, Director of Operations for the City of Pittsburgh, and Kyle Webster from Action Housing for joining us tonight. It's just very, very important One Hood Power Hour talking about the situation right now in the city with the unhoused. So thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to continuing this conversation because, you know, this is something that we're going to continue, you know, have to come together as a city, as a county, as a region, and continue to really, you know, tap into our collective humanity to help solve this issue and you know, and really try to impact the community in a positive way. So I thank you, Kyle and Lisa, so much for your leadership and your work in helping to solve this problem. Thank you for joining us tonight on the One Hood Power Hour.
Kahari, there was actually a question I was going to just really quickly answer. Someone asked the Smithfield shelter, how long it would be open. The current contract on the Smithfield shelter is until March 15th. So the county and the city have made the decision to keep that shelter open through the entirety of the winter season. It may be extended longer. I really do applaud them because I think there was the mentality it was going to be shut down once Second Avenue Commons opened. And I'm glad that our government leaders stepped up and found the funding to keep it going. But the current contract goes until at least March 15th. And I say at least because it is very much able to be extended if there's the resources and the government officials see it as necessary.
Now, thank you so much. And thank you for answering that question. That's very important. And thank you so much for joining us.
And then I myself lagging.
Yeah.
I do believe that the county does hold the bulk of the financial responsibility when it comes to housing dollars. So if you're watching this, please, please, please make sure you reach out to all your county council people this week. Again, their budget hearings are going on, and this is something that is really important to us. So please, like Kari and I both have experience with displacement and housing. This is something that we care a lot about. And we're trying to get as clear answers as we can for you. Sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. But this is something that we really want people to organize around and engage around. So please, please, please make sure you're reaching out to your county council members this week. They do have and will be the stewards of that funding. With that, Kahari, I will pass it over to you to close us out.
And again, want to thank Kyle Webster from Action Housing and Lisa Frank from the City of Pittsburgh, again, for sharing so much information, particularly Lisa for staying with us for the pretty much the entire hour, answering questions and providing insight on how the city is tackling this issue. Again, this issue, you know, is so important. As I said earlier, you know, this is a issue that hits home for me, you know, having experienced, you know, a very close family member who was unhoused. You know, when I was, you know, coming home from college as a young man and having to, you know, help my mother get back into housing. So very, very, very issue that very much hits home for me. So I really thank Kyle and Lisa, for their leadership and working so hard, as well as the many of the folks that they work with that they reference, who weren't on the show tonight, who are, on the ground every day, dealing with these issues and trying to provide services for the unhoused community. We just thank you so much. And thank you everyone who provided questions for tonight and was in the comment section and looking for a clarity, on how these issues are being tackled. We just appreciate everyone who participated in tonight's episode. So Miracle, anything else you want to say before we sign off for tonight?
No, that's it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We will see you next Monday night to talk a little bit more about housing and environmental issues facing the city. So we'll see you next week. Over the course of a few years, life yielded a crisis of pandemics, resulting in many reeling and searching for answers. Black men especially have had to grieve the passing of hip-hop icons DMX, Michael K. Williams, Biz Markie, and many others. How has this impacted Black men? How has this altered the way they see themselves, their ability to express themselves, and their mental health? We sit down with Black men raised on the culture of hip-hop and ask them directly. Let's have a bite, take a step back in order to move forward. I'm your host, Miracle Jones, and this is Brunch with the Black Man.